Listen, at some point or another, we've all been in a glass case of our own emotions, allowing the intensity of the situation change everything about our physiological self. That's life. However, have you ever wondered how this response alters your odds, likelihood, and probability of health over time? Maybe, just maybe, you build a system to keep you out of that phone booth just a little more often. Just saying. Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. Today, we are once again diving into everybody's 5-pound mushy membrane to talk about the link between emotional regulation and brain longevity, aka why it's probably a good idea to hop out of the front seat of the emotional roller coaster and onto the control platform instead. Not, well, in motion, of course. Because as we know, our brain is quite powerful. And when it elicits a negative emotional response, it doesn't just keep it up there until it passes. Oh, no. It transforms it into a biochemical and physiological response which runs rampant throughout the body, often triggering a fight or flight response which is on par with a toddler throwing a temper tantrum, but without the excuse of being a toddler. So we'll start today by talking about what happens in our brain when we get negatively emotional, then dive into this new data highlighting why building practices to help keep your emotional cool may be key for brain longevity. And finally, as always, review some tips and strategies to help do just that. And avoid the frequent visits to the glass case of emotion. I heard they had to remove all the phone booths from New York City for that very reason. Okay, maybe not. First, our brain's emotional roller coaster. It's becoming more and more evident that our brain is nothing but set in stone. I mean, we call it a 5-pound mushy membrane for a reason, right? What I'm getting to here is that growing evidence continues to display that it has this amazing ability to build, strengthen, and prune neuronal circuits throughout the course of our life. Yes, that's right. Even into adulthood. So you don't need to stop all learning at 25 and just go with what you got. Although it'd certainly be an interesting world run by 25-year-olds. But even with this amazing plasticity to adapt, learn, and become more efficient in a relatively short amount of time, there are still key factors throughout development which prime the brain to act and respond in unique ways in different situations. For example, as Dr. Robert Sapolsky brilliantly broke down in his book Behave, certain events throughout childhood, like forms of trauma, can predispose certain areas of the brain to grow more active and abundant, like one of the key emotional regions of the brain, the amygdala, priming it to be more active into adulthood, potentially explaining the vast differences in emotional regulating capabilities across the population. And I get it, the aforementioned scenario may not be an ideal one, but it can very much also be worked on, which we'll get to in just a little bit. Given these many environmental variables, it is believed that we all have somewhat of a unique circuit strength and structure of regions by the time we slow down the rapid adolescent neuronal development in our mid-20s. In addition, it's also been observed that as we gain chronological years, there are some common patterns that tend to arise across the broader population. For example, older people tend to regulate their emotions better than younger people and focus more easily on positive detail even in a negative circumstance. A nice quality, no? But this may not always be the case. Or there could be scenarios where emotional stress over a long period of time hinders one's health before this chill as a cucumber state manifests in the golden years. It's safe to say the best we have at this point is pure speculation. But what we do know, as briefly described earlier, this 5-pound mushy membrane which sits inside our cranial cabinets is quite powerful, being able to activate a downstream stress response from a thought or feeling alone, which is essentially kind of what an emotion is. An intense, impulsive response throughout one's body, activating both the limbic system, which is responsible for processing emotions, and the primal brain stem, responsible for autonomic functions, causing a flurry of psychological derived stress, which upregulates the secretion of stress hormones, begins to constrict blood vessels, increases heart rate, blood pressure, core body temperature, and immune activity, all in the presence of zero immediate danger outside the mind. That is, just a brain fire drill. And as a byproduct, we've entered a fight or flight sympathetic nervous system state. Pretty intense, right? Now, you may be thinking, isn't this just what makes us humans human? And not all emotions are bad. What about pure joy, fulfillment, compassion, empathy, camaraderie? All of those are wonderful, to which you'd be 100% right. However, just like with all things in this modern world, it's the dose which makes the poison. And for the broader population in this 24/7 on-the-go world, the thought-provoked stress, anxiety, and depression tend to outweigh the opposite. And over time, the chronic overactivation of this emotional stress response can impair our cellular self to the point of disease and dysfunction, making it a top longevity liability that we, intelligent walking apes, face. Thus, the way we think, the mental frameworks that we build, along with the habits and systems that we build to keep us balanced in this chaotic world, are critical. Because just as bad internal vibes can bring us down, good ones can do just the opposite. As neuronal markers of emotional resilience and empathy in aging are increasingly recognized as important protective factors against mental illness and cognitive decline. Makes you think. In a non-triggering way, of course. With that, let's see what this new study has to say. The study. Researchers out of the University of Geneva sought to investigate whether emotional inertia, aka the lasting effect of an emotional response, in the brain is modulated by individual traits relevant for healthy aging, such as empathy, rumination, and anxiety. Their aim was to not only see what regions of the brain lit up in response to an emotional stimuli, but also how long it took to recover to a normal state. And to do this, researchers showed participants short video clips of other people in a state of emotional suffering. Sounds fun, right? For example, a natural disaster or distressed situation, while also showing them videos of neutral emotional content, all while actively observing their brain activity using functional MRI. First, the team captured a young group and an old group, average ages of 24 and 68, and then repeated the same experiment with a larger group of older adults. Here, they observed both reactivity and recovery in key regions of the brain, such as the default mode network, which is our active resting brain state, the posterior cingulate cortex, which processes autobiographical memories, aka the memories of your past self, and the amygdala, which processes important emotional stimuli, all to tease out both age-related and inter-age differences, and to see if there were any patterns which may explain the decline in cognition, yet preservation of emotional IQ in aging brains. So, what'd they find? First and foremost, they found that age does, in fact, affect brain responses to emotional stimuli. As older adults activated less regions typically associated with empathy, such as the anterior insula, and more of those related to social cognition and emotional regulation, such as the prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex, all aligning with previous studies showing older adults have better emotional regulation. Now, as for regulating emotional inertia, here's where things got interesting. Across the two experiments, they observed selective increases in regional activity after high emotional stimuli, with these effects only happening in older adults, suggesting an important link of emotional regulation mechanisms to the aging brain. They found that key areas of the default mode network not only activated during the high emotion videos, but also continued their activity during subsequent rest, providing direct evidence for emotional inertia in the aging brain. With the strength of the posterior cingulate cortex amygdala circuit predicting older adult anxiety and rumination levels, leading researchers to beg the question, does poor emotional regulation and anxiety throughout life increase the risk of neurodegeneration, or is it the other way around? They summarize by saying, this data unveils age-related effects on neural processing associated with rumination and repetitive negative thinking. Mental states associated not only with maladaptive emotional regulation, but also with increased risk of cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. Now, it's important to point out that a direct link between an upregulated emotional response and neurodegeneration was neither detected or looked for. The questioned connection is merely a hypothesis that this research group continues to look into. But that does open at least my eyes to say, knowing all the stress and suffering that chronic anxiety and negative thinking can stir up within our pretty cool meat suit, building a strategy to manage, mitigate, and improve it has gotta be on the longevity to-do list, right? So let's talk about some ways to do just that. Finding balance. At this point, you may be wondering what type of emotional regulator you yourself are, or you might already know. Are you someone who tends to fall into a negative stress-inducing mindset easily? Or are you a master of going with the flow? All good and important introspective questions to ask. And before you dig into that very question, keep in mind, we all get worked up at some point or another. That's just part of being the most cognitively advanced organism living in the most prosperous time civilization has ever seen. We're emotional creatures with advanced social constructs. For the first time, not having to spend all day, every day completing tasks to ensure survival of the species. So instead, we create imaginary scenarios in our head based off some triggering stimuli we just scrolled through on our nifty connectivity device. Those are the cards that are currently in most of our hands. So knowing what we know about the deleterious effects of chronic stress, which we cover in depth on videos across this channel, all of which will be linked in the description below, let's play our hand the best we can, because that's all we can do. Control what we can control, right? Which happens to be the theme and Stoic philosophy for many of the tactical strategies we're about to touch on. First, the table stakes. Of course. Things you can control and do each and every day, which will positively affect the structure and biochemistry in your brain. Habits that shift our biological wiring to feel better, be more relaxed, and overall optimistic. Here's the short list. First, diet. Are you eating high quality, real whole foods? Next, exercise. Are you moving your badonkadonk in an intentional and methodical way on a frequent basis? Then we have circadian aligned sleep. Are you getting up and going to bed in accordance with the day-night cycles of the sun? Not staying up into the wee hours of the night and prioritizing 7 to 8 hours of consistent sleep per night. And finally, nature. Are you interacting with the environment that we've evolved in for millions of years and have deep health-promoting, mind-calming connections to? These are the foundational components of all things health and longevity, all of which we have exclusive deep dives on which break down their underlying mechanisms of actions, linked below. Moving away from the table stakes, there are a number of habits which have also shown great promise in improving peace of mind. One of my favorites is becoming a better observer of your mind, because you need to know where you're at to get better, right? Taking a few minutes, 1, 2, 5, 10, whatever you can spare, and simply sitting still and observing your thoughts as they enter and leave is one of the best ways to do this. Yeah, it may sound a little familiar, like something called meditation or mindfulness, because it is. A practice like this has been shown to induce beneficial effects on so many levels. But in this context, it helps you baseline your mind and become a better observer of what's not you, your thoughts, and document what type of pent-up repetitive thoughts may be behind certain emotional stress-inducing tendencies. You gotta remember, your mind is the sole most important thing that you have control over in this world. But left to its own devices, and without putting in the work to develop your framework, to ingest all of the many happenings in this world and reframing them in a way which promotes the mindset you desire, is a dangerous game. Remember, a positive mindset is like a muscle. You gotta exercise it. And subtle reminders throughout the day can help keep you on track. Maybe it's a positive reoccurring note on your morning alarm or calendar, or repeating the values that you strive to identify with at a certain point each day. It could be journaling or verbalizing what you're grateful for, sending good vibes someone else's way, or simply reminding yourself to take things for what they are. Let each situation or event fully pass through you. Sleep on it and assess them without the emotional baggage the next day, all while creating distance from those triggers which are designed to entice a strong emotional response and craving for more. Things like the 24/7 news cycle, your favorite social media feed, and toxic people, relationships, and jobs. As we know from all our other powwows, the environment we place ourselves in is a big modulator of present-day health and long-term longevity. So make yours as friendly as possible. Control what you can control. And remember that things are typically neither as good or as bad as they seem. Know that change doesn't happen overnight. It happens over many nights. So be patient and kind to yourself along the way. Once again, your mindset is one of the best and most powerful health tools that you have. Being able to radically improve your present day while also your odds, likelihood, and probability of longevity. So use it for good and not locking yourself in a glass case of emotion for hours or days on end. Or for that matter, life. You got this.